Everybody just yells and screams at each other. Nobody's civil anymore. Nobody thinks what it's like to be the other guy.
The 2019 Joker was a peculiar choice on DC's part. Instead of the typical summer blockbuster superhero movie that the masses can enjoy, Todd Phillips instead created a character movie that possesses relevant questions and social commentaries. I see a lot of people talking about how Joker provides political insights and the dynamics of class struggles, as well as depicting mental illnesses in a realistic light, and although the movie does touch upon all of those aspects, those are not the things that make Joker into such a special movie for me. Joker is ultimately a story about a man, an individual, and what Joker does best is when it raises questions regarding the individual and our nature within existence. In this video, I will attempt to shed some light as to why Arthur transformed into the Joker and its relevance to our individual lives. This is Harmony in Irony. Joker tells the story of Arthur Fleck, an adult man with a shitty job who lives alone with his mother, who is also the closest thing he has to a friend. He aspires to be a stand-up comic, however, he hasn't seen much success in that area. On top of that, he has a condition which causes him to laugh even when he doesn't want to.
Hello, it's good to be here.
So things are pretty bad for Arthur here. Arthur is presumably depressed. Here is where we see Arthur's foundational problem with his life. He simply desires to be integrated to society in a way that makes sense to him. What Arthur desires is to find his place in the world. For him, this is his aspiration, to be a stand-up comedian. Here we see that he simply wants to be seen for what he is, a man who wants to spread joy and laughter to everybody. However, Arthur's conflicting expectations toward reality induces a feeling in him in which makes him feel like he's invisible. Even worse, there are times when he simply does not feel like he exists. The state of anxiety Arthur experiences induces a fundamental confusion within him. He struggles and fails to make sense out of his own existence. Arthur shouts at the void of existence to give him meaning and purpose, however what he receives in return is silence. Feeling lost that his life fails to make sense, he turns his fate onto death for meaning. It's as if saying, maybe things will make sense when I kill myself. This perfectly describes what philosopher Albert Camus called the absurd. He used the word to describe how man looks for intrinsic universal meaning in a world that is devoid of such a thing. Not being able to find this meaning, Camus then turned to the problem of suicide. Man simply finds himself existing, without anyone telling him what his actual purpose is. Now, in a world like that, wouldn't killing yourself be logical? Well, we'll get back to Camus later, but for now, however, Arthur's existential struggle actually does get a little better afterward. Something awoken within him when he finally committed murders in the subway. The subway killing happened to be a cathartic experience for Arthur. For what seems like the first time in his life, he feels like he's becoming a part of the world around him. This is obvious when you look at the toilet dancing scene. Arthur moves his limbs around, feeling like he finally owns his body, feeling like his arms and legs are finally his own. Now, there are several potential reasons why such a heinous act is cathartic to Arthur. However, what seems obvious would be that it was Arthur's first real chance of releasing all of those pent-up anger and emotion he's kept inside him this entire time. If you pay attention, you will notice that Arthur is always repressing something. He represses how he feels about having to take care of his mother all the time. He quite literally represses his laughing fits. He represses all of his resentment toward his job, his boss, his therapist. his co-workers, and of course, even himself. You can really see from all of his scenes interacting with these people in the beginning of the movie that Arthur is constantly acting how a proper person should act, fully understanding and nodding his head along. He never really stands up for himself whenever anybody bullies him. He simply takes it. Now this takes us back to the subway scene, in which Arthur is given the chance to release what he's got pent up inside. And well, release them he did. All of those anger and resentment are now taken out on those three guys on the subway. And so Arthur establishes himself as a part of the world, now that he is somewhat certain that he does in fact exist.
I said, for my whole life, I didn't know if I even really existed. But I do.
He then feels the need to explain this relationship. In what way is he a part of this world? He is in the world, sure, but what role does he play? What is his identity? This places him on the starting point of his journey for self-discovery.
You're gonna kill me. You're gonna give me a heart attack.
I don't give you up!
No. I'm not talking to you until you stop being angry.
Okay.
Arthur tried to learn his roots by exploring the relationship his mom supposedly had with Thomas Wayne. He figured that his mom had been lying to him this whole time and that he was actually Thomas's bastard son with his mom. However, after confronting Thomas Wayne and his little trip to Arkham, Arthur was left with disappointment. He discovered that no, Thomas Wayne is not the long-lost father that he thought he had, and to make matters worse, the records revealed that he was really the son of nobody. He wasn't his mother's actual son, and his condition is actually the result of abuse. These revelations severed almost all of Arthur's ties to the world, all but one, and that is his relationship with his girlfriend. And of course, after learning that her two, like the rest of him, are lacking in truth and authenticity, Arthur had finally lost all identifiers he had with the world. Nothing defined him as a person anymore. The relationship he has established with the world are put in disarray. The thing about human being is how we define ourselves to what's around us. We're always someone's son or daughter, we're always a company's employee, a citizen of a country, a friend of a community, a parent of a kid. We are never just ourselves. Because if that were the case, our identity will have nothing to root itself toward. Now this is the condition Arthur finds himself on. This is where we might find ourselves returning to Camus. Camus advocated to live without appeal. He posited that the point is not to find the meaning of life, but to live despite not knowing what that meaning is. Now, this idea is reflected very well in Arthur's shift after his whole identity fiasco, as one can see from one of the movie's most famous quotes.
You know what's funny? You know what really makes me laugh? I used to think that my life was a tragedy. But now I realize it's a fucking comedy.
The issue of identity marks Arthur's final point of transformation. He failed to formulate a concrete self. Without any ties left to the world, he acts out his pain and suffering in ironic comedy, laughing at the absurdity that is his life. Here, Arthur finds nothing around him that can justify his existence. He merely finds himself existing, without any clearly defined purpose. Now, this is a conception the existentialist Sartre came up with in describing existentialism. If we are talking about literally anything else except for human beings, everything has a clearly defined purpose. The purpose of a table was decided before the table even started being made, for example. However, human beings simply do not have that kind of luxury. Our first experience is that of simply existing. There were no predetermined blueprint that can be tested for validity that explains our purpose for existing. Existence preceding essence. That is how Sartre described existentialism. Now, in such a state, Sartre encourages the person to find and make their own meaning. And it just so happens that the Joker finds it in meaningless, nonsensical destruction. His acts can be seen as a form of rebellion toward his failure to find meaning in life. He finds it funny that society politicizes his actions and how the media narrative implies a grand purpose behind his acts. However, we all know that that was never what he was about. All of Arthur's experiences culminated into the clown prince of crime, standing over failed attempts in searching for meaning and masking his pain behind constant maniacal laughter. The Joker finally establishes himself as an agent of chaos. The story of Arthur is a tragedy. Joker poses existential commentary on fundamental questions of existence. Everybody can relate to not knowing their place in the world, to feeling lost and confused, to feel like your existence simply does not make sense. One might think that Arthur found his place in the world in manifesting his personal self in the Joker. In celebrating the meaninglessness of existence, he found its meaning. In reveling in violence, he is at peace. In repressing his pain and disappointment, he releases manic joy and laughter. Or maybe his story is a cautionary tale. It warns us to formulate meaning and to hold on to it, to mitigate one's destructive nihilistic tendencies. Maybe Joker is an invitation to create personal meaning in a flawed society. In this sense, Arthur is just a sad case of someone who is a victim to the flaws of human existence, and what becomes of someone that fails to bear that burden. In the end, why I think Joker was one of the best movies of 2019 is because there's a little bit of Arthur in all of us. And it's our choices that ultimately decide whether we become the Arthur that simply desires to bring joy and happiness into other people's lives, or the sadistic mass murderer who commit violence because the only thing that makes sense about his life is death, both his own and that of others. Thank you for watching that video essay of mine. I'm finally back. I kind of changed my channel name and brand and everything, but other things are coming, other content or video essays, discussion videos, the usual stuff. Subscribe if you like what you see, comment, check out some of my other stuff. I'll have them somewhere on the screen right now. And have a good one, guys. Thank you.
I know I've let you down. I've been a fool to myself. I thought that I could live for no one else. But now, through all the hurt